Batman Arkham Asylum is the most Batman video game of all time, even 15 years after its release. What I mean by that is that Arkham Asylum captures the essence of the classic Batman in a way not seen since the animated series and Tim Burton films. A true gothic noir-style adventure filled with miserable revelations and a devolving madness that progresses as the night darkens, all with an unmistakably unique colour scheming and contrast. Looking back, before the superhero genre was legitimized by the MCU, it was an eclectic genre that tackled many different themes and styles, which often led to mostly garbage films and games, with a few exceptions that still stand as pillars of the genre today. However, while films like Iron Man 1 and The Dark Knight set the tone for superhero films that persist to this day, Batman Arkham Asylum remains unique amongst its comic book-inspired gaming peers as a more direct inspiration of the comics. While I'm not going to criticize the Spider-Man games at all, you can see how these games are more inspired by the Spider-Man films rather than any comic storyline, by including frequent large spectacle events in order to keep the player engaged as a viewer would be. In contrast, Asylum starts with a 10-minute walking sequence which takes the time to establish the setting and tone that the game is going for, communicating to us that this is the Batman of the comics rather than any version casual fans might be familiar with. Arkham Asylum's scope was limited to just the titular facility, and while this was probably done out of caution that the game would fail, it ended up making the game feel much more personal and immersive. The small area of the island also adds to the prison-like feel of the game. You're supposed to be locked in the Joker's maze, scurrying around like a rat while he observes you from above, giggling and cackling at your every move. The art style of Asylum is also quite unique amongst the trilogy, incorporating a more grungier shade of green to add atmosphere. Where later installments would try and capture a sense of realism, Asylum leans into a more stylized form of noir. I have nothing against City and Night's more explosive art style, but Asylum looks like it was adapted directly from the pages of a comic, rather than trying to emulate the Dark Knight films. Asylum's plot also comes across as a more classical Batman story than its sequels, as it's a bit more silly. Joker getting purposefully arrested to create an army of monsters isn't the most dramatic of storylines, but again, it feels so comic-like. While many may have forgotten the lighter side of Batman due to modern interpretations, there has always been a bit of levity to the Caped Crusader. Sure, things like the Adam West Show took it too far, but Burton perfectly blended the campiness and darker elements of the comics. Now obviously the tastes of audiences change over time. Look at the MCU, they never changed anything about their films, but as the culture shifted away from them and towards more serious and darker media, the audience turned on the levity of the MCU. Asylum is a wonderful mix of Batman's classic and modern tones. The characters and performances are all reminiscent of the gritty and deeply grounded Batman stories of today, while the presentation and plot could all be taken out of an episode of the animated series, creating this wonderful authenticity that the later Batman games would stray away from. I think it's about time I prefaced this entire video with the fact that I don't think Asylum is the best Batman game, as City just improved on too much from this game, from a mechanical to a narrative standpoint, but Asylum is still leagues above both Night and Origins. I'm simply stating that Asylum is the most true-to-form Batman game, and that it feels like it's the most pure adaptation of the Bat. Something else Asylum does much better than its sequels is escalation. As the night continues and the plot becomes thicker, the madhouse becomes more and more chaotic. The escaped inmates begin to tear down more and more of the asylum as they graffiti the sides of the building. Trash and debris litter the verdant gardens and the thugs continue to multiply. This all comes to a head when Ivy gets loose and all semblance of order on the island is lost as her vines tear it to shreds. This is an excellent way of escalating the game as we reach the climax. As the sequels are held back by their open-world nature, Asylum's genre of Metroidvania allows for more evolution of the map, as you'll be going back to areas you've already visited over the course of the game, so the designers can change things up to make the experience feel fresh. This gives the game a sense of pacing that's absent from the open-world titles. As more and more of the island begins to collapse, you can feel the intensity build, and while paying off that finale with a lame Joker fight is a bit disappointing, It's also exactly how an episode of the animated series would end. And that's the core reason why Arkham Asylum is such an iconic piece of Batman media. It's one of the few to try and bridge the gaps between the kid-friendly silliness of Batman and the morose tones of the Batman of today. It appeals to both audiences without alienating the other. Kids today don't have any Batman media for them to latch onto. The Snyder and Reeves films are squarely aimed at adults, and there aren't any notable animated TV shows airing today. I personally became a Batman fan by watching Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, and then I transitioned into the Arkham games. Arkham Asylum is a game that appeals to both kids and adults, while games like Arkham Knight are age-restricted because they're not trying to get new fans. I'll be back in 2 days. In the meantime, here's a video about why Arkham Knight might have been age-restricted.